"Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Damien Wolfe looked up from the withdrawal slip he was filling out, confused. The bank manager, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, stood 2 feet away with his arms crossed, his face tight with disgust. "I'm sorry, what?" Damien asked. "You heard me. We have standards here. This is a professional establishment. We don't serve—" The manager gestured vaguely at Damien's appearance. "People like you." Damien glanced down at himself. His jeans were dirty. His jacket had a tear on the sleeve. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. He probably smelled like the industrial cleaning solution from the shelter. "I just need to make a wire transfer," Damien said calmly. "It'll take 5 minutes." "Sir, I'm not going to ask again." "Mr. Brennan," a young teller, early 20s, nervous, stepped forward. "He has an account card. Maybe we should just—" "Maya, step back," the manager snapped. "Security." A guard approached, hand on his radio. Damien stayed perfectly still, his jaw clenched. "You have 10 seconds to leave voluntarily," the manager said, "or we call the police." Around them, other customers watched. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked away. Damien stood slowly, his hands visible, non-threatening. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "The only mistake," the manager replied, "would be letting someone like you near our customers' money." Damien walked toward the exit. At the door, he turned back one last time. 10 minutes, he said. "What?" the manager asked. "Give me 10 minutes. Then we'll see who made the mistake." He walked out into the Manhattan morning. The bank manager shook his head, turning to the other customers with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry you had to witness that. We maintain very high standards here at First Manhattan Trust." What Robert Brennan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man he just threw out owned 43% of the bank's parent company. And in exactly 10 minutes, Damien Wolfe was about to walk back in and destroy every assumption they'd ever made about who deserves respect. You just watched a man get thrown out of a bank for looking poor, but you don't know who he really is. You don't know why he looked that way. And you don't know what's about to happen when he walks back through those doors. If you need to understand how 10 minutes can expose everything wrong with judging people by their appearance, if you want to see what happens when the person you dismiss turns out to be the person with all the power, then stay with me. Because this story is about to show you that sometimes the most dangerous assumption you can make is thinking you know someone's worth by looking at them. Hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see this. Now let me take you back 12 hours earlier. To the moment Damien Wolfe made a choice that would change everything. Damien Wolfe was not supposed to be at the Street Vincent's homeless shelter at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. He was supposed to be at the Plaza Hotel, attending the annual WolfeTech Investor Gala. Champagne, networking, speeches about quarterly growth and market dominance. His assistant had called 17 times. Damien ignored every call, because 6 hours earlier he'd received a different call, one that mattered more than any investor dinner ever could. "Mr. Wolfe," the voice had been young, shaking. "This is Maya Santos. I volunteer at Street Vincent's. You told me to call if we ever had an emergency." Maya. The college student he'd met 2 years ago when he'd anonymously donated $5 million to the shelter. The one who didn't know he was a billionaire. The one who'd given him a tour, shown him the work they did, treated him like a human being instead of a walking checkbook. "What's wrong?" Damien had asked. "The heating system failed. It's 19 degrees outside. We have 70 people here and no heat. The city says they can't send emergency repair until morning. These people are going to freeze, Mr. Wolfe. I don't know what to do." Damien had been in his tuxedo, ready to leave for the gala. He'd made a choice. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Start moving everyone to the main hall. Get every blanket you have. I'm bringing help." He'd called his head of facilities, pulled 3 emergency HVAC technicians from WolfeTech's buildings, bought every portable heater from every hardware store still open in Manhattan. Then he'd gone to the shelter and worked through the night. Not as Damien Wolfe, billionaire CEO. Just as Damien, a guy helping to move cots, distribute blankets, serve hot coffee, hold the hand of an elderly veteran who was having a panic attack from the cold. He'd gotten his $1,000 tuxedo pants dirty kneeling on the floor to help a diabetic woman check her blood sugar. He'd torn his jacket sleeve, catching a falling shelf. He'd stopped caring what he looked like around 4 a.m. when he'd realized these people needed help, not polish. By 7 a.m., the heating was fixed. Everyone was safe, warm, fed. Maya had hugged him, crying with relief. "Thank you. I don't know how you made all this happen, but thank you." Damien had just smiled. That's what people do. They help. He'd left the shelter at 8 a.m., exhausted, disheveled, running on zero sleep, and then he'd remembered. He needed to wire emergency funds to the shelter's account. The heating repair had cost $40,000 more than budgeted. They needed it replaced immediately. First Manhattan Trust Bank was 2 blocks away. Damien had walked there directly, still in his dirty clothes, unshaven, looking nothing like the Forbes magazine cover version of himself. He'd just wanted to help. He didn't think about how he looked. He didn't think it would matter. That was his first mistake. Damien Wolfe had built WolfeTech from nothing. At 40 years old, he was worth $8 billion. His company revolutionized data security. Half the Fortune 500 used his software, but he'd grown up in the Bronx. Public housing, single mother working 2 jobs, scholarship kid who'd eaten ramen for 4 years straight at MIT. He knew what it was like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to have people assume you were nobody because of how you dressed or where you came from. And he'd promised himself that when he made it, if he made it, he'd never forget. That's why he volunteered at Street Vincent's anonymously, why he donated to food banks under shell corporations, why he paid for college scholarships for kids from his old neighborhood without putting his name on them. Because he remembered being 17, walking into a bank to open his first checking account with the $200 he'd saved from his summer job, and having the banker look at him like he was wasting their time. He remembered how that felt. And he'd promised himself he'd never make anyone else feel that way. But he'd also learned something in 20 years of business. Most people didn't share that promise. Most people judged by appearance, by clothes, by surface-level markers of success. And this morning, Damien was about to find out just how deep that judgment ran. He'd walked into First Manhattan Trust at 8:47 a.m. It was a beautiful building, marble floors, mahogany desks, the kind of old money establishment that screamed, "We've been here since 1894 and we know it." Damien had pulled out his account card, black titanium, reserved for the bank's highest-tier clients, and approached the first available teller. Maya Santos, the same Maya from the shelter, working her morning shift before classes. Her eyes had widened with recognition. "Damien? What are you doing here? Are you okay?" She'd seen him at the shelter hours ago, working alongside her. She knew him as a volunteer, someone who cared. "I'm fine," Damien had said, smiling. "I need to wire $40,000 to Street Vincent's emergency fund. Can you help me?" Maya had nodded, typing into her computer. "Of course. Let me just pull up your account." And that's when the manager had appeared. Robert Brennan, 15 years at the bank, impeccable record, 3 customer service awards. He'd taken one look at Damien, dirty clothes, unshaven, tired, and made an assumption. "Maya," he'd said sharply, "step away from the terminal." "But Mr. Brennan, he has an account." I said step away. Brennan had turned to Damien with barely concealed disgust. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." And that's when everything fell apart. Damien stood his ground. "I'm a customer here. I have an account. I just need to make a wire transfer." "Sir, I don't know how you got that card," Brennan said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But we have security measures for situations like this." "Situations like what?" Damien asked, his voice dangerously calm. "People who try to use stolen or fraudulent cards to access accounts that don't belong to them." Around them, other customers were staring now, some with curiosity, some with pity, some with the same disgust Brennan wore on his face. Maya stepped forward again. "Mr. Brennan, I already verified." "Maya, if you interrupt me one more time." "You're going on suspension," Brennan snapped. "I don't know what sympathy story this man gave you, but we are not a charity. We are a bank, and we serve legitimate customers, not—" He gestured at Damien. "Whatever this is." Damien felt the familiar burn of humiliation, the same feeling from when he was 17, from every time someone looked at him and saw less than. "Call your supervisor," Damien said quietly. "Verify my account. It'll take 30 seconds. "I am the supervisor," Brennan said, "and I'm telling you to leave. Now." "Mr. Brennan." Another customer, an older woman in a designer suit, approached. Perhaps you should just check his account. It seems like a simple resolution. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, Brennan interrupted smoothly. But we have protocols for security threats. This man is clearly not a typical First Manhattan Trust customer. Look at him. Everyone looked at Damien. Dirty jeans, torn jacket, exhaustion carved into his face. He looked like he'd been sleeping on the street. And Damien realized, to them, that was all that mattered. Not that he'd been up all night saving lives. Not that he was trying to help people in need. Just that he didn't look the part. Security, Brennan called. Please escort this individual out. The guard approached a young guy, maybe 25, who looked uncomfortable but followed orders. Sir, I need you to come with me, he said to Damien. Maya's voice cracked. This is wrong. He's not... Maya Santos, Brennan said coldly. You're suspended, effective immediately. Clear your station and report to HR. Maya's face went pale. What? I didn't do anything. You attempted to process a transaction for a suspicious individual without proper verification. You're a liability. Leave. Now. Tears filled Maya's eyes. And Damien saw it clearly. This wasn't just about him. This was about how the bank treated anyone who didn't fit their image, who didn't look right, who needed help instead of offering profit. Maya was being punished for showing compassion. Damien made a decision. You're right, he said to Brennan. I'll leave. Brennan smiled, satisfied. A wise choice. But you should know something, Damien continued, pulling out his phone. My name is Damien Wolfe. I own WolfeTech. And I own 43% of Atlantic Holdings, the parent company of this bank. Brennan's smile faltered. Damien pulled up his verified social media profile. 8 million followers, blue checkmark. Photos of him accepting business awards, shaking hands with the president, speaking at the UN. He turned the phone around. Brennan's face drained of all color. That's not possible, he whispered. It's very possible, Damien said calmly. And in 10 minutes, I'm coming back. With the regional director, with legal counsel, and with a full review of how this branch operates. He looked at Maya, who was staring at him in complete shock. Maya, don't clear your station. You're going to need it, because you just became head teller. Then he looked at Brennan. You, on the other hand, should start packing your office. Damien walked out. Behind him, the bank erupted into chaos. Here's what destroys me about this moment. Robert Brennan looked at a tired man in dirty clothes and saw a threat. A problem. Someone beneath the bank's standards. He never asked why Damien looked that way. Never considered that maybe appearances don't tell the whole story. Never thought that the man in front of him might have just spent 12 hours saving lives. He just judged, dismissed, humiliated. And he punished Maya, a young woman trying to do her job with compassion for daring to treat someone with dignity. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've been judged by how you looked on your worst day. Maybe someone made assumptions about your worth based on your clothes, your car, your address, your accent. Maybe you've been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere because you didn't look the part. Or maybe, and this is harder to admit, maybe you've been the one doing the judging. Looking at someone and deciding in 3 seconds whether they deserve your time, your respect, your help. We all have. Subscribe if you're learning like that bank is about to learn that you never know who you're really talking to. That dignity isn't determined by appearance. That the person you dismiss might be exactly who you needed to impress. Damien made 3 phone calls from the sidewalk outside the bank. The first was to his head of corporate affairs. I need you at First Manhattan Trust Wall Street branch. Now, bring legal. The second was to the CEO of Atlantic Holdings, the bank's parent company. Michael, it's Damien. We need to talk about your Wall Street branch. I'm invoking my shareholder authority to call an emergency review. The third was to his assistant. Cancel everything today, and get me a change of clothes. I'm at... The bank on Wall Street? His assistant interrupted. I'm already outside. I figured you might need backup. Damien smiled. You're terrifying and I love it. 10 minutes later, Damien walked back into First Manhattan Trust. This time, he was wearing a fresh suit his assistant brought, shaved using the executive bathroom at WolfeTech's nearby office, looking every inch the billionaire CEO. But more importantly, he wasn't alone. He was flanked by 3 lawyers, the head of corporate affairs, and Michael Dorsey, CEO of Atlantic Holdings, the bank's parent company. The branch had gone silent when they entered. Robert Brennan stood frozen behind the customer service desk, his face white as paper. Maya sat at her teller station, her hands shaking. Every customer, every employee, every person in that building was staring. Damien walked straight to Brennan. "You asked me to leave?" Damien said calmly. "I left. Now I'm back, as a shareholder and board member of your parent company, and we're going to have a conversation about how this branch operates." Brennan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Michael Dorsey stepped forward. "Robert, I think we need your office, now." They disappeared into the manager's office. Brennan, Dorsey, the lawyers. Damien stayed on the floor. He walked to Maya's station. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. You're actually the guy from the shelter," Damien finished. "That part was real, Maya. Everything else is just details. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to see me as a person," Damien said. "Not a checkbook. You treated me with respect when I looked like nothing. That's who you are, and that's why you're about to get promoted." "I don't understand," Maya whispered. "You defended someone you thought was powerless," Damien said. "You risked your job to do the right thing. That's the kind of person I want running this branch." Here's what Maya's story teaches us. She had everything to lose: her job, her income, her ability to pay for college, and she still stepped forward to defend someone she thought was homeless, someone she thought had no power, someone who couldn't do anything for her. She did it because it was right, not because it was profitable, not because it would advance her career, just because a human being deserved dignity. How many of us do that? How many of us risk something real to defend someone who can't repay us? It's easy to be kind when it costs nothing. It's easy to stand up for people when you know you'll be rewarded. But Maya didn't know. She thought she was throwing away her future for a stranger. And she did it anyway. Subscribe if you believe that the true measure of character is how you treat people who can't do anything for you. Because maybe the world needs more Mayas and fewer Brennans. The meeting in Brennan's office lasted 20 minutes. When the door opened, Brennan walked out with his personal items in a box, his face blank with shock. Michael Dorsey addressed the entire branch. Effective immediately, Robert Brennan is no longer employed by First Manhattan Trust or any Atlantic Holdings subsidiary. His actions this morning violated our core values of respect, inclusion, and customer service. Brennan stopped at the door, looking back at Damien with something between rage and humiliation. "You're destroying my career over one mistake," he said bitterly. "No," Damien said quietly. "You destroyed your career by treating human beings like they're disposable. I'm just holding you accountable." Brennan left. The branch remained silent. Damien addressed the room. "I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to fire everyone. I'm here to change how this branch operates." He looked at each employee, each customer. "This morning, I was judged by my appearance. I was told I didn't meet your standards. I was treated like a security threat because I looked tired and dirty after spending 12 hours helping homeless people survive a heating crisis." Whispers rippled through the crowd. "But here's the thing," Damien continued. "Robert Brennan isn't an isolated case. He's a symptom of a culture that values appearance over character, that judges worth by clothes instead of actions, that punishes compassion and rewards cruelty." He turned to Maya. "Maya Santos just got suspended for treating me like a human being, for trying to process a legitimate transaction, for defending someone she thought was powerless." He smiled at her. "Maya, you're reinstated, and you're promoted to assistant branch manager, effective immediately. Salary, $90,000, plus benefits." Maya's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "The rest of you," Damien said, addressing the staff, "you have a choice. You can continue working the way you have been, judging customers, enforcing standards that are really just prejudices, treating people differently based on how they look." He paused. "Or you can change. You can start seeing customers as human beings. You can ask questions before making assumptions. You can treat dignity as the real standard." Michael Dorsey stepped forward. "Effective today, First Manhattan Trust is implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all employees. We're also reviewing our customer service protocols to ensure no one else is treated the way Mr. Wolfe was treated. After the meeting, after the staff dispersed, after Maya stopped crying and thanked Damien 17 times, Damien asked for something nobody expected. "I want to meet with Robert Brennan," he said to Michael, "before he fully leaves the company." Michael frowned. "Why? He's already terminated. Legal is handling—" "I know," Damien interrupted, "but I want to talk to him." They found Brennan in the parking garage, loading his box into his car. He looked older than he had an hour ago, defeated. "Mr. Brennan," Damien called. Brennan turned, his jaw tight. "Come to gloat?" "No," Damien said. "I came to offer you something." Brennan laughed bitterly. "What could you possibly offer me? You destroyed my career." "You destroyed your career," Damien corrected. "But I want to give you a chance to rebuild it differently." He handed Brennan a business card. "This is the director of Street Vincent's homeless shelter. The place I was volunteering last night. The reason I looked the way I did." Brennan stared at the card. "I'm funding a 6-month program," Damien continued. "Community service combined with education. You'll work at the shelter, serving meals, organizing donations, listening to people's stories. And you'll attend workshops on bias, empathy, and what dignity really means." "Why would I do that?" Brennan asked. "Because if you complete it," Damien said, "I'll write you a recommendation letter. I'll help you find a position somewhere that values what you'll have learned. Not at my bank, but somewhere you can start over." Brennan looked at the card, then at Damien. "You're serious?" "I am," Damien said. "Because I don't believe one mistake has to define your entire life. I believe people can change. But you have to actually want to change." He met Brennan's eyes. "You looked at me this morning and saw trash. You need to understand why that was wrong. Really understand it. Not just intellectually, but in your gut. And the only way to do that is to spend time with people you've been trained to dismiss." Brennan was quiet for a long moment. "What if I say no?" he finally asked. "Then you're on your own," Damien said simply. "No recommendation, no second chance, just the consequences of your actions." Brennan looked at the card again. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 23 years ago, I was a kid from the Bronx who got rejected from a bank because I didn't look right," Damien said. "And one person, one branch manager at a different bank took a chance on me anyway, helped me open my first account, treated me with respect when nobody else would." He smiled. "That small act of kindness changed my life. I'm just paying it forward." 3 months later, Damien returned to Street Vincent's shelter. Robert Brennan was there, serving dinner to a line of homeless veterans. His sleeves were rolled up. His expensive watch was gone, replaced with a simple Timex. He was really listening to an elderly man telling a story about his time in Vietnam. When the veteran finished, Brennan didn't rush him along. He didn't look uncomfortable. He just said, "Thank you for your service, and for sharing that with me." Maya, who'd been promoted again to branch manager at 24 years old, stood beside Damien. "He's different," she said quietly. "I didn't think people like him could change." "Most people can," Damien said. "If they want to. If someone gives them a reason to." He'd also done something else, something he hadn't told anyone about. He'd tracked down every person who'd been in the bank that morning, every customer who'd stared, every employee who'd stayed silent while he was being humiliated, and he'd sent each of them a letter. Not angry, not vengeful, just honest. You watched someone get treated with cruelty and you said nothing. Maybe you were uncomfortable. Maybe you didn't know what to do. But silence is a choice. And that choice has consequences for the person being hurt and for the person you become when you look away. I'm not telling you this to shame you. I'm telling you this because I believe we can all do better. We can speak up. We can defend dignity. We can choose kindness, even when it costs something. Especially when it costs something. He'd signed each letter and included a donation form for Street Vincent's shelter. 80% of them donated. 10 of them showed up to volunteer. And one, an elderly woman who'd tried to defend him, sent a letter back. "Thank you for reminding me that silence isn't neutral. I won't make that mistake again." Damien kept that letter on his desk. Because that's what kindness looks like. Not revenge. Not punishment. Not destroying everyone who wronged you. But creating a path for people to be better, to learn, to choose differently next time. Even the people who hurt you. Especially the people who hurt you. Here's what Damien understood that most of us don't. Revenge feels good for about 10 minutes. It's satisfying to watch someone who hurt you suffer, to use your power to destroy them, to make sure they never forget what they did. But it doesn't change anything. It doesn't make the world better. It just creates more pain, more bitterness, more people who've been hurt and now want to hurt others. Damien had every right to destroy Robert Brennan's life, to blacklist him, to make sure he never worked in banking again, to let him drown in the consequences of his actions. And part of him wanted to, but instead, he offered grace. Not because Brennan deserved it, but because Damien believed people can change if someone shows them how. That one choice, that decision to offer a path to redemption instead of just punishment, transformed not only Brennan but everyone watching. It showed them what real power looks like, not domination, but the courage to break the cycle of cruelty. Maybe you've been hurt by someone who judged you unfairly, who dismissed you, who made you feel less than. And maybe you have the power now to hurt them back. The question is, what will you do with that power? Will you use it to destroy or to transform? Subscribe if you believe that the strongest thing you can do isn't revenge. It's offering someone the chance to become better than they were. Because maybe that's how we change the world, one act of grace at a time. This is the story of Damien Wolfe and Robert Brennan, a billionaire who was judged by his appearance, and a banker who learned that dignity isn't determined by dress code. Damien could have destroyed him, could have ended his career with no second chance, could have let him live with the consequences and moved on, but he didn't. Because Damien remembered being 17, being dismissed, being treated like he didn't matter, and he remembered the one person who looked past his appearance and saw his potential. That's the choice he made for Brennan, not because Brennan earned it, but because someone had once made it for him. And that's how kindness works. It doesn't ask if someone deserves it. It just asks, can they become better if someone believes they can? Sometimes the answer is yes. And that makes all the difference. The end.